There is something inside you that wakes up at midnight and walks to the kitchen. You're not hungry, you already ate dinner. But something pulls you anyway, toward the richest, densest thing in the house. You've blamed yourself for it your whole life. You shouldn't. That urge has nothing to do with weakness. It is a 3 million-year-old survival mechanism still running inside your body, and when you find out what those ancestors were actually eating, you will never look at food the same way again. Let's go back. Not to ancient Rome, not to medieval Europe. Much further. 3 million years ago, the creature that would eventually become you wasn't hunting anything. It didn't have the tools, the speed, or the strength. What it had was patience, desperation, and a brain just sharp enough to notice an opportunity. On the open grasslands of Africa, large predators made kills daily. Lions, leopards, saber-toothed cats, they ate what they wanted, the tender muscle, the organs, and walked away. Then came the scavengers, hyenas, vultures, jackals. They stripped whatever was left. By the time your early ancestor arrived, there was almost nothing. Just bones. But those bones held a secret. Inside the thick femur of a wildebeest, sealed behind walls of calcium no hyena jaw could crack, sat one of the most calorie-rich substances in the natural world. Bone marrow. Pale, waxy, loaded with fat. And fat, for a creature that might not eat again for 2 days, was the difference between surviving and disappearing. Your ancestors didn't need speed. They needed tools. They picked up sharp stones, crude, ugly, nothing like what we'd call elegant, and smashed those bones open. Archaeologists have found these stones near animal remains dating back 3.3 million years. Strike marks on ancient bones matched the angle and force of a handheld rock, not a tooth. They were eating what nothing else could reach, and they didn't stop at marrow. A large skull cracked open contains close to a pound of brain tissue, almost pure fat and protein. For a small-bodied hominid burning calories fast and finding food slowly, a single skull was the equivalent of today's emergency ration pack. High calorie, immediately available, no cooking required. This is the origin of your body's obsession with fat and richness. Every time you choose the fattier cut, the creamier sauce, the denser food over the lighter one, your body is replaying a very old calculation. Fat meant survival, lean meant risk. That preference didn't disappear just because supermarkets appeared. And it wasn't only marrow and brain. For millions of years, insects were not an exotic novelty eaten on a dare. They were a staple. Termites, beetle larvae, grubs dug from rotting wood, fat, protein, easy to collect in large numbers. A single rotting log could feed several individuals. No chasing required, no risk of injury. Insects were the most reliable food source our earliest ancestors had, and the body didn't waste energy building disgust towards something that kept it alive. That disgust came much later, built by cultures that had moved on to other options. For most of human prehistory, every meal was raw. Raw meat is dense, tough, and loaded with bacteria. Raw tubers are woody and indigestible. Raw grains are nearly useless to the human gut. Your digestive system has to work enormous amounts of overtime just to extract basic nutrition from uncooked food, and even then it misses much of what's there. Then, somewhere around 1 million years ago, everything changed. Inside a cave in South Africa called Wonderwerk, a name that translates roughly to miracle, scientists found the oldest confirmed traces of fire ever produced by humans. Charred bones, burned plant ash, evidence of a hearth, 1 million years old. Fire was not just warmth or light. Fire was the invention that rewired human biology. Here is what cooking actually does. Stripped of all romanticism, it breaks food down before it enters your body. Heat denatures proteins, ruptures cell walls, gelatinizes starches. By the time cooked food reaches your intestines, half the work is already done. Your gut extracts significantly more nutrition from a cooked sweet potato than a raw one. Your body burns far fewer calories processing cooked meat than raw meat. The result? Surplus energy. And the human body did something extraordinary with that surplus. It fed the brain. The human brain is a metabolic catastrophe. It weighs roughly 3 pounds but demands 1/5 of everything your body produces in energy. No other organ in any other animal comes close to that ratio. Running that kind of machine on raw leaves and grubs was always a losing equation. But with cooked food, calorie-dense, pre-broken down, efficiently absorbed, the energy budget finally balanced. As cooking became standard, human digestive tracts shrank. Shorter intestines require less maintenance energy. That freed up even more calories for the brain. Over hundreds of thousands of generations, brain volume climbed. Language grew more complex. Social structures deepened. Tools became refined. Art appeared on cave walls. All of it traces back to a fire and what our ancestors decided to put in it. By 300,000 years ago, the creatures walking the earth looked almost identical to you. Same skeletal structure, same skull dimensions, same hands, and they were eating with an ambition and variety that would surprise most people today. Think of the broadest, most varied diet you can imagine. Then remove the processing, the packaging, the farming, and the domestication. What's left is what your direct ancestors were eating. Across the open plains of Europe and Asia, they hunted animals that no longer exist. Woolly mammoths, giant elk, aurochs. A single mammoth kill could sustain a group for weeks, which meant that big game. Hunting wasn't just about food. It was a logistical strategy. One successful hunt bought time to rest, teach children, develop language, plan the next move. Along coastlines and rivers, fish and shellfish became critical. Sites in South Africa, Morocco, and Indonesia show that humans were harvesting shellfish from the ocean's edge as far back as 165,000 years ago. The shellfish were opened, roasted over coals, and eaten in quantity. Some researchers believe coastal diets, rich in omega-3 fatty acids found in seafood, may have directly accelerated the complexity of human brain development. Inland, the diet broadened further. Wild roots dug from the ground, seeds gathered from grasses, mushrooms, berries, leaves, and bark. Evidence from 32,000-year-old campsites shows that humans were already grinding plant materials into rough flour on flat stones, mixing it with water and cooking it on hot rocks. Flatbread, in its most primitive form, predates the first civilizations by tens of thousands of years. And honey. No food in nature packs as much immediate energy into a single source. Among the Hadza, a hunter-gatherer group in Tanzania, who have maintained a diet essentially unchanged from our Stone Age ancestors, researchers found that wild honey accounts for roughly 15% of total annual calorie intake. Hadza men will climb bare-trunk trees for 30 feet, endure hundreds of stings, smoke out aggressive swarms, and repeat the trip within days. The reward is that significant. That craving didn't vanish. It evolved into every sweet thing you consume today. Your brain still releases the same chemical reward when sugar hits your bloodstream, a cascade of dopamine that evolved not as a pleasure mechanism but as a learning tool. When something caused that response, your ancestors' brains flagged it. Remember this, find it again. The signal was built for a world where ripe fruit was seasonal, honey was defended by thousands of stinging insects, and sweetness in nature almost always meant safe, fast energy. Modern food manufacturing understood that signal before neuroscience named it. Sugar was added to bread, condiments, pasta sauce, breakfast cereals, and drinks. The ancient survival flag is now being tripped dozens of times a day by foods engineered to trigger it, in a body that has no evolved mechanism to say stop. There is a site in Somerset, England, called Gough's Cave. It was excavated across multiple decades, and what researchers found inside forced an uncomfortable update to how we think about our ancestors. Human bones, roughly 15,000 years old, treated in a specific and deliberate way. The long bones had been cracked open along their shafts. The same technique used on deer and horse bones found in the same cave. The marrow had been extracted. Skulls had been carefully processed, the face and base removed with precision, the curved cranial vault cleaned and shaped. What remained were bowls, human skull cups. The first impulse is to reach for desperation. Maybe they were starving. But that explanation collapses immediately. The same excavation site contained substantial remains of horses, red deer, and other large animals. There was food, significant amounts of it. A later analysis calculated that the caloric value of an adult human body, despite how that sounds, is actually quite low compared to the large animals these people were already hunting. A horse provides far more calories, a mammoth exponentially more. Eating other humans was never an efficient survival strategy, which means something else was happening. One of the long bones had been engraved after the meat was removed, a zigzag pattern, deliberately cut into the bare bone. This was not extraction, this was ceremony. Similar remains have been found across Europe, Germany, France, Spain, Croatia. At multiple sites, across multiple time periods, the evidence points to the same conclusion. Cannibalism was practiced by modern humans, not as a last resort, not as survival, but as ritual behavior that held meaning within those communities. We don't know exactly what that meaning was. We may never know. But the evidence is unambiguous. Your ancestors did this. Not some distant evolutionary cousin, anatomically modern humans, identical to you in every physical way. This was part of the human story. One more piece of the picture that most people find difficult to sit with. Your ancestors didn't just eat things that were fresh. They ate things that were old, sometimes very old. A large kill, a horse, a deer, a bison, produces far more meat than any small group can consume in a single sitting. There was no refrigeration, no curing, no canning. So they stored it, buried in cool ground, wedged into cave crevices, submerged in cold streams. Days passed, then more days. Bacteria moved in. The surface changed color, the smell changed dramatically. They came back and ate it anyway. This sounds repulsive, but the biology tells a different story. Meat in an early stage of bacterial breakdown has already been partially digested by microorganisms. The proteins have begun to degrade into simpler compounds easier to absorb. Some of the bacteria themselves produce B vitamins, B12 in particular, that are essential to human neurological function. Cold-stored, partially fermented meat may have been genuinely easier for the human digestive system to process than fresh raw meat. Your ancestors didn't just tolerate this. Over many generations, the human gut microbiome adapted to it, and the preference may have developed alongside the biology. Every fermented food that humans consider a delicacy today is a controlled, refined version of that same process. Aged cheese is cultured milk colonized by specific molds and bacteria, left to transform over weeks or months. Wine is grape juice with sugar converted to alcohol by yeast. Sourdough bread rises because wild bacteria are fermenting the dough. Kimchi, miso, soy sauce, vinegar, yogurt, all fermentation. All rot, managed and directed. The acquired taste for sour, tangy, funky flavors that many people develop, the preference for aged Parmesan over fresh, for sourdough over standard bread, for aged whiskey over new spirit. That's not sophistication, that's a very old instinct finding a new expression. Here is what 3 million years of eating history actually tells us. If you've made it this far, you're clearly the kind of person who actually wants to understand how things work. Not just the surface version, but the real story underneath. That's exactly what this channel is built for. If that's your thing, hit subscribe. No pressure, no gimmicks, just more of this. Every week. And if you found this one interesting, there's someone in your life who would too, send it to them. Okay, back to it. Every craving your body generates was built by necessity. Fat was survival in seasons of scarcity. Sugar was concentrated energy in a world where calories were hard to find. Salt helped regulate fluid balance and was genuinely rare outside coastal environments. Protein built the muscle and tissue that kept early humans alive in a world that required enormous physical output every single day. None of those signals are broken. They worked perfectly for the environment they were designed for. The problem is that the environment vanished. Agriculture, industrialization, refrigeration, global supply chains, food manufacturing, all of it appeared in the last 10,000 years, which is less than 0.5% of the total time humans have existed. Your genome had no time to update. Your cravings had no reason to change. Those signals are now running inside a body surrounded by unlimited food, in a world where the next meal is never more than a few minutes away. You are not weak for craving the wrong things. You are ancient, running in a world that arrived too fast. The next time you stand in a lit kitchen at midnight, pulling things out of the fridge you don't need, know what's actually happening. You are 3 million years of survival instinct looking for a threat that no longer exists, trying to prepare for a famine that isn't coming, storing energy for a winter that modern infrastructure already solved. The program is still running. It's just running in the wrong century.